You're sitting in a freezing cafe, your baby sleeping beside you, your hand shaking not from fear, but from hunger and cold. You have no money, no future, and in your bag is a manuscript that 12 publishers have already rejected. Now answer this honestly. At that moment, would you still believe in yourself? Because this is not fiction. This was J.K. Rowling's real life. And what she did next didn't just change her future, it changed the world. Stay with me, because this story might completely change how you see failure and yourself. Before the world ever whispered the name Harry Potter, before the magic, the fame, the fortune, there was only silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that followed Joanne Rowling everywhere she went. It began with loss. Her mother died after a long battle with multiple sclerosis, and that grief did not simply pass. It settled deep inside her like a permanent shadow. Imagine carrying that kind of pain day after day without relief, not just sadness, but a quiet, lingering agony that reshapes how you see the world. And then, life didn't pause to let her heal. It got worse. She entered a marriage that quickly turned toxic, unstable, and emotionally exhausting. The kind of relationship that drains you slowly until you barely recognize yourself anymore. Eventually, she escaped, but escape came at a cost. She found herself alone, a single mother, in a foreign place, with a baby in her arms and no clear future ahead. Let me ask you something. What would you do if everything in your life collapsed at once? Because that is exactly where she stood. No stable income. No support system. Just survival. She depended on government welfare to get by, counting every coin, measuring every meal. The world outside felt cold, distant, almost unforgiving. And inside her mind, the battle was even worse. She was diagnosed with severe clinical depression, not the kind you can shake off with a good day or a positive thought. This was heavy, paralyzing, the kind that convinces you that you are a failure, that nothing will ever change, that you are stuck. She once described herself as the biggest failure she knew. Think about that for a second. The woman who would later inspire millions once believed she was completely worthless. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Instead of giving up, instead of surrendering to that darkness, she did something quiet, almost invisible. She started writing, not in a beautiful office, not in a comfortable home, but in small, freezing cafes in Edinburgh. She would sit there for hours because it was warmer than her apartment, her baby sleeping beside her, her hands cold, her body exhausted, and still she wrote, relentlessly, line after line, page after page. She poured her pain into a story about a boy who felt lost, unwanted, different, a boy who lived in darkness but was destined for something greater. Sound familiar? That story became her escape. A fragile light in a desolate reality. Every word she wrote was a small act of defiance against a life that seemed determined to break her. But the world did not care about her struggle. When she finally finished her manuscript, she sent out, hoping, just hoping, someone would see its value. They didn't. One rejection, then another, then another. 12 publishers looked at her work and said no. 12 times. The world told her that her dream was not good enough, that her story did not matter, that she should stop. And this is the moment where most people walk away. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. What happens when the thing you believe in most is rejected again and again? Because right here, in this freezing cafe, with rejection letters piling up and doubt growing louder, her story could have ended. But it didn't. And what happened next would change not only her life, but the entire world. 12 rejections, 12 closed doors, 12 moments where it would have been completely reasonable to stop. And yet she didn't. Think about where we left her, sitting in that cold Edinburgh cafe, surrounded by doubt, holding on to a dream that no one else seemed to believe in. Most people would have taken those rejection letters as a final answer, a verdict, but she saw something different. She saw a challenge. There's a quiet kind of power in that mindset, a kind of defiance that refuses to accept reality as it is. Instead, it insists on rewriting it. So she kept going. She printed her manuscript again. She mailed it again. She waited again. And each time, she risked the same painful outcome. Rejection. Let me ask you something. How many times could you hear no before you start to believe it? Because every no has a voice. It whispers things like, "You're not good enough. This isn't worth it. Just give up." But she didn't listen. This is where perseverance stops being a word and becomes a decision, a daily, exhausting decision to continue, even when there's no sign of success. And then something shifted. Not dramatically, not instantly, but quietly, almost like fate was testing her limits before opening the door. A small publishing house in London, Bloomsbury, agreed to take a look at her manuscript, not because they were convinced it would succeed, but simply out of curiosity. Now imagine this moment. Her work, the one that had been rejected again and again, sitting on a desk, waiting, one more chance. But the real turning point didn't come from a boardroom decision. It came from an 8-year-old girl. The daughter of the publisher picked up the manuscript and began reading the first chapter. No expectations, no industry bias, just pure curiosity. And something magical happened. She was captivated. Page after page, she became completely absorbed in the story. When she finished the first chapter, she didn't analyze it. She didn't question its market value. She simply asked for more. She wanted to know what happened next. That single moment changed everything. Because sometimes, it doesn't matter how many people reject you. It only takes one person to truly see you. One person to believe. One person to say yes. Bloomsbury decided to take a chance on her book. It wasn't a massive deal. It wasn't fame overnight. In fact, the initial advice she received was almost discouraging. They told her to get a day job because children's books don't make much money. Imagine hearing that, even at your breakthrough moment. But this time, it didn't break her, because this was different. This was proof that her story had value, that her voice mattered, that all those nights in the freezing cafe were not meaningless. Against all odds, after being dismissed again and again, she had found her opening. And here's the part most people don't realize. Success rarely arrives as a dramatic explosion. More often, it begins as a small crack in the wall. Easy to miss, easy to underestimate. But if you have the courage to push through that crack, everything can change. So now, the question becomes even more powerful. What do you do after the world finally says yes? Because that yes was only the beginning. What came next would turn her from a struggling single mother into one of the most recognized names on the planet. But it would also bring a cost that no one talks about. One yes. That was all it took to change everything. After years of rejection, silence, and struggle, that single decision from Bloomsbury set something in motion that no one could predict it, not even her. The first Harry Potter book was published quietly. No massive marketing campaign. No global anticipation. Just a small print run and a story that had already been rejected 12 times. But then something extraordinary happened. People started reading it, and they didn't stop. Children were captivated. Parents were intrigued. Word began to spread, slowly at first. Then all at once, the story traveled from one reader to another, like a secret too magical to keep. And suddenly, the world was paying attention. Books turned into a series. The series became a phenomenon, translated into dozens of languages, sold in the hundreds of millions, midnight releases, lines stretching around bookstores, a generation growing up with magic in their hands. And at the center of it all was Joanne Rowling, the same woman who once sat in a freezing cafe, wondered if her life had any value. Now she stood under flashing lights, red carpets, interviews, applause echoing in every corner of the world. She became one of the richest authors in history, a billionaire, a global icon. It sounds like a perfect ending, doesn't it? But let me ask you something. What do you think success feels like when the whole world is watching you? Because here's the truth that most people never see. Success comes with a price. As her fame grew, her privacy disappeared. Completely. Every word she said was analyzed. Every decision was questioned. Every part of her life became public. Imagine not being able to walk down the street without being recognized, without being judged, without being followed. The same world that once ignored her was now watching her every move. And that kind of attention can be overwhelming. But what she did next surprised even more people. Instead of holding on to her billionaire status, she made a decision that very few would dare to make. She gave away millions of dollars to charity. Quietly, consistently, she chose impact over wealth. She chose values over status. And in doing so, she was no longer a billionaire. Think about that. After climbing to the very top, she willingly stepped away from that title. Because for her, success was never just about money. But the story doesn't end there. As the years passed, the admiration she once received began to shift. Some of her public statements sparked intense debate. The same audience that once celebrated her began to criticize her. The backlash was loud, emotional, unforgiving. Headlines changed, opinions divided, support turned into opposition. And once again, she found herself in a familiar place. Not the same as before, but similar in feeling. Misunderstood, judged, under pressure. This is a part of success that no one puts on the cover of a book. The higher you rise, the more visible your fall can become. And yet, through all of it, one thing remained constant. She never stopped being herself. Now think back to that moment in Chapter 1. A broken woman, sitting in the cold, holding on to a dream that the world kept rejecting. That manuscript, those 12 rejections, they were not the end of her story. They were the beginning, because without them, there would be no resilience, no perseverance, no Harry Potter, and maybe no reminder for all of us that rejection is not a final answer. It's a test, a filter, a moment that asks one simple question. Are you going to stop, or are you going to continue, even when everything tells you not to? Now that you've seen the full journey, from absolute darkness to unimaginable success, let's pause for a moment, not to admire her, but to reflect on you, because this story is not just about J.K. Rowling. It's about what happens when life pushes you to your lowest point and what you choose to do next. Think about this carefully. Her success did not begin when the book was published. It began much earlier, in the cold, in the silence, in the moments when no one was watching. So here's the first lesson. Sometimes, the darkest chapters of your life are not the end of your story. They are the foundation of it. Pain can feel meaningless when you are inside it. It feels heavy, unfair, endless. But in many cases, that pain is shaping something inside you. Strength, clarity, depth. Without her suffering, there would be no Harry Potter, no emotional truth, no connection with millions of readers. So the question is not, why is this happening to me? The better question is, what is this preparing me for? Now let's go deeper. The second lesson is about perseverance. You heard it in the story, but now you need to feel it. Perseverance is not motivation. It's not excitement. It's not waking up every day feeling confident. Perseverance is continuing when you are tired, when you are doubting yourself, when the results are not coming. 12 rejections. Most people would have stopped at 3 or 5. She continued at 12. That is the difference. Let me ask you something directly. What are you about to give up on right now? Because maybe, just maybe, you are one step away from your turning point. And finally, the third lesson. You don't need everyone to believe in you. That's a trap. People spend years trying to convince the world that they are good enough, that their idea matters, that their dream is worth something. But her story proves something powerful. You only need one person, one opportunity, one moment where everything aligns. So instead of chasing approval from everyone, focus on becoming undeniable. Now, let's sharpen your English. These are the words you heard in the story. Words that carry power, emotion, and precision. Manuscript, meaning an unpublished written work example. She carried her manuscript to 12 publishers. Perseverance, meaning the unwavering effort to achieve something despite difficulties example. Her perseverance turned failure into magic. Backlash, meaning a strong, intense negative public reaction example. She faced intense public backlash later in life. Now it's your turn. Don't just listen. Use these words. Tell me in the comments, how do you handle rejection? How do you practice perseverance in your own life? Try to use at least one of these words in your sentence. And if the story made you think differently, even for a moment, subscribe for more stories like this. Stories that don't just improve your English, but change the way you see your life. Tell me honestly, how do you react when life tells you no? Do you stop? Or do you keep going? Write your answer in the comments and challenge yourself to use one word from today's story, like perseverance, manuscript, or backlash. This is not just practice. This is how you make the language yours. And if the story stayed with you, if it made you think differently about failure, about rejection, about your own path, then subscribe. Because here, we don't just learn English. We build a mindset that refuses to quit.